All right, so that just happened. Yeah, this is the show. We're talking about Free Comic Book Day because we forgot to do that last week. We are also talking about some other things that we have interacted this week. Evil Dead Rise, Lewis Black put out a new stand-up, so on and so forth. Let's do the thing. All right, so right out the gate, Free Comic Book Day was pretty great this year. Got some really interesting books. I'm very intrigued with how Marvel and DC are going to try and combat their abysmal sales, let's say, after they've seen in more recent history the success of the crowdfunded, self-funded books that have been put out by more independent artists. There is an obvious change that needs to happen, and are they going to take note? I don't know, but it seems that they're at least going to try and fix their quality issue, but it's still far too early to call that one. So, Free Comic Book Day happens every year. I wish I had my bag of comics. It's downstairs still, but I got a whole bunch. And the great thing about the comic book shop that I go to is if they have any left over from, say, the year before, then they'll put them back out on the table for the following year. So I got a couple of books that I missed last year because I didn't go to Free Comic Book Day last year because I had to work all day because, day jobs. So yeah, super exciting. Loved it. Let's talk about your happenings on Free Comic Book Day. I actually got to catch up with a friend for a little while on Free Comic Book Day because he had a booth at the comic book shop because they do it like it's a big event, so they have artists and writers and stuff come up. So yeah, Free Comic Book Day was the thing that happened, and I loved it. And we're moving on. Next up, we are talking very briefly about the new Lewis Black special on Amazon Prime. Lewis Black is one of the greatest comedians, one of the best comedians of the last 2 decades. I wouldn't say greatest comedians of all time, but of the last 2 decades for sure. If you don't know, Lewis Black, he's the guy that yells a lot, and he's kind of older, and he talks like this and he points. Yeah, good stuff. He used to be, so this is the thing about Lewis Black is I will always and forever, as long as he's doing comedy, I will very likely love the comedy that he's doing, about 90%. He used to be much more libertarian in his political leanings as far as his comedy goes. I don't know his personal life. He could very well be putting on a character and be completely different behind the scenes. That's irrelevant to what we're talking about. But now he seems to be getting a little more lefty every time I see him, and it sucks because the libertarian, the more centrist comedy was the good stuff because he legitimately made fun of everyone on both sides with valid points and with, logic and things. So, I don't know, it just seems... and I'm not taking offense to the fact that he's making fun of conservatives at all. Like, I think he should make fun of conservatives. I think he should make fun of the more liberal sides as well. And he should consider information. I understand that the political bits that he did in the more recent, in this, the name of the stand-up is called Thank You for Risking Your Life. And so the voiceover that he did at the beginning of it made it clear that it was recorded in like the very early days of COVID. I think he says something in the narration at the beginning that approximately 4 or 5 days after this was filmed is when everything got shut down. So it was still very early in the news cycle. It was still very early in the things that we knew about the virus. So, like, a lot of it is excused because of that, but just the venom and the vehemence with which he delivers some of his jokes hasn't aged very well, and it's only been a couple of years. So we're going to say that, and just generally speaking, it's great because Lewis Black is great, so I absolutely recommend going to watch it. I still had a hell of a time, was still belly laughing at most of it. So yeah, there you go. From there, our other thing that happened this week, and again, we had a big one last week because we had a lot of ground to make up for. This week, still kind of sorting things out in other aspects. So Evil Dead Rise happened. Finally, I got into a theater. This is the kind of movie that, well, most movies, I would say, that you need to see in a theater, at least for the first time you see it. It is available on digital. If you want to purchase or pay to rent, then you can do that. I don't know when a physical version will be released, but the streaming, the proper, like, I think it'll be coming to HBO Max, I'm pretty sure. It should be about a month out. Don't hold me to that, but I think that's accurate. So yeah, Evil Dead Rise is a thing that happened, and I really like the Evil Dead franchise. I was not a fan of the reboot. I have spoken with some people since I watched this that did like the reboot, but I don't know, the reboot took itself far too seriously, and was just a bloodbath for the sake of putting red film up on the screen. Like, there was no... It didn't feel like there was a reason for the blood. It was just like, look at how bloody it is. Whereas in Evil Dead Rise, I think there's a narrative reason that they use as much blood as they do, because it's still very gory. It's still really, really bloody. There's still a lot of really interesting things that they're doing with this movie that couldn't have been done with the Sam Raimi movies in the early days of this franchise. So yeah, I have an appreciation for it. I feel like this is such a better execution of what the reboot was trying to do, that it just propels this movie that much more forward. There's a lot of callbacks in this that were great. Come Get Some, Shotgun, the chainsaw is a word that I was looking for. We got, like, just so, there are moments of this movie where you question your sanity, because the dialogue, it's very well written, and the dialogue is funny. Even in some of the darkest, most disturbing points of this movie, some of the dialogue goes, oh no, am I a horrible person because I just laughed at that? Like, well, who am I? Well, like, it makes you question so much about your soul, and oh god, it is 100% a movie that if you have an opportunity to see it in the theaters, and you are a horror movie fan of any kind, really, horror comedy, just general horror, so on and so forth, like, Evil Dead Rise is a movie you should watch. I can't gush about this enough. It was such a fun experience. We went with a group of people. Honestly, we're 4 weeks into the runtime of this movie, and the theater was still approximately half full. I say that because you fill up and then you leave, right? So it wasn't half empty because it didn't fill up and then half the people left. It was half the people showed up for the viewing of the movie. So that was a good sign in my eyes, and I thought that was pretty cool. But that, my nerds, is what happened to me in the last week. What happened to you? What did you interact with? Did you read some great comic books? Did you watch a great TV show or anything like that? Maisel and Succession, obviously, were things that happened this week as well. I have, at this point... Actually, no. I'm going to take that back. Let's talk about Succession for a moment, shall we? I was going to cut this off without talking about it, but I just remembered that there was a point that I wanted to make about Succession. So, leading up to this episode, I think this was episode 7 in the season 4 of Succession. When we talked about this last week, this is a show that I said the more conservative-minded enjoyers of pop culture should give a chance. It's not written against them by and large, but it is not written for the other side necessarily either. So that was my sentiment last week. And then the most recent episode happened, and I don't know, I feel like I'm gonna walk that back a little bit, because I think this is definitely written for more liberal-minded viewers. That doesn't pull away from the quality of this show really much at all. It pulls away from the quality of, or the knowledge of the writers as to how the conservative side views the world and views their own viewing of the world. Like, we'll get to that. So up until season 4, episode 7, we got a pretty balanced view of entertainment media, of news media, even to a degree. And really, it's just a character study of these children of a very powerful man in news media. And yeah, you could really, like, if you were stretching a little bit, you could make comparisons to Logan Roy and say Donald Trump or something like that. And I can kind of see it, but that's really, really stretching to make a point. But by and large, again, I'm going to say, by and large, it was not written against the conservatives any more than it was written against liberal minds. So this episode 7, we get, we're doing a presidential election. And the heavy implication with this presidential election is that the conservative candidate in this representation is a horrible person, which, again, politicians, so sure, all politicians are horrible people. But that's not the comment that they were making with this. The comment that they were making is that just the conservative was a horrible person, not both candidates were horrible people for potentially different reasons, very likely for similar reasons. And then from that, the implication then becomes that conservative news media, or conservative minds in general, are by extension horrible people, or that they don't believe in the things that they espouse in public. They don't believe in these policies that they want to see enacted. They don't actually believe these things. They actually think that their candidate is a horrible person, and that, like, just the only reason they want him in power is so that they can become also more powerful and rich. And that is just a fundamental lack of understanding of the conservative argument at all. Like, it was very frustrating. It very much pulled me out of my enjoyment of this series. Not completely, but there was definitely a step back and going, well, at least it's almost over. So, all right, that starts the conversation. We'll probably talk about this again next week after the next episode. I think the next episode might be the last one, or we might have 3 more. I don't know if it's supposed to be 8 or 10, but so yeah, that's what we got. What did you guys interact with? What do you think about my interactions with things this week? That just happened, and so on and so forth. Coming up next week, again, we will elaborate on the succession situation. Hopefully, we will get a little bit more of a light at the end of the tunnel as far as the Maisel situation is concerned. This week's episode, I don't think was necessarily worth talking about as much as previous episodes. But yeah, that's all I can really say going forward. Oh no, I take that back. I have a concert this week, so we will have that as well. Gonna go see the band Placebo. So we'll talk about that in the next week's That Just Happened. Thank you very much, nerds, for joining me. Let me know what happened for you this week. What did you interact with? And we'll see you next time. Before we go, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here, and that just happened.